So distressing your graphic would be to make it look vintage or weathered typically, or just to add some texture. Let me take this one and I'll create a new document, and we're in Adobe Illustrator still. And I'll blow that up. Let me put a brown background behind it. It's pretty close to that black. I think it looks pretty nice. And then I want to change this to like a unsaturated sort of tan color. I think this is sort of a vintage look. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And with Illustrator, I like to use bitmap TIFFs. And here's the deal with bitmap TIFFs. They're Photoshop files, they're pixel files, but they're black and white. So there's no gray going on. And if it looks like there's any gray, it's actually just like a diffusion dither or a halftone. So let me show you one of these in Photoshop. And let me open up one called Garage Texture. And this is sort of just a grunge texture. And you can see how it's just a black and white file. And when you zoom in really close, you'll notice these are just black pixels and white pixels. And that's it. There's no gray, like I said. So there's no transparency in this when it's in Photoshop. But if I take that same file and just place it in Illustrator, you can either drag it in or do like a file place. And this is a really subtle texture. Let me just lighten up that background so you can see it. So the thing you'll notice is all of a sudden it's transparent. So whatever's black, you can actually assign a color. So I can assign this black grit like a background color and see how it knocks back to the background color. I don't know if you can really see this on your screen, so let me just change it to white, and you see how that is. There it is, the yellow. But typically when you're adding distress, you either want to go back to the background color or a shade of the background color or just to black. So I selected the background color, and maybe I'll just add a little darkness to it. Let me actually add in another one. And the nice thing about these, since they're transparent in Illustrator, is that you can layer them up. You can just tack on layers and layers of this kind of distress. Okay, this one's a really not very subtle distress texture. This is a bad photocopy texture, and this was made by basically a broken photocopy machine. And the thing with bitmap textures is, like when you open them in Photoshop, how when I zoomed in and it was just pixelated, they actually look a little more pixelated when you have them in Illustrator. But it's kind of just the way Illustrator displays these things. When you go to print, say on a t-shirt, or if you go file, save for web, these bitmap textures actually look really nice. Let me zoom in here. So you can see that texture looks really good. It might be a little too overwhelming for this graphic, but I just put it in there to show you the effect. So that's it with Illustrator. Other than just that vector shading we put in earlier, I wouldn't mess too much with vector distress. The reason is, if you have a lot of it that floods your graphic, you're gonna have a billion points. It's gonna slow your computer down. And also the thing with vector distress is it looks vectory. It looks, streamlined or live traced. And I typically think it doesn't look that good, where bitmap TIFFs retain so much more detail, and they're really light on your computer. They won't like make your files crash or anything like that. They won't make your file size really big. So they're just perfect for Illustrator. And so that's Illustrator. Let me show you how I add distress in Adobe Photoshop.